Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of Star Cells and God. My name is Rana. I'm a biochemist and a Christian apologist, and I'm joined via Zoom by Dr. Uditha Jayatunga, who is a senior consultant in rehabilitation medicine in the United Kingdom. And today we're going to be talking about scientific challenges to macroevolution. You don't want to miss it. Well, Dr. Jayatunga, Uditha, welcome back to Star Cells and God. You've been on the show in the past. You did a great episode for us discussing the brain's amazing complexity. And today we're going to be talking about the question of macroevolution. But thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. And I certainly enjoyed my first presentation, and I hope this also will be useful to RTB and the wider community.
Good, good. Well, thank you so much. We're going to be talking about what you perceive to be some significant scientific challenges to macroevolution, maybe even devastating challenges. And the first thing I think we want to do is make sure we define exactly what you mean by macroevolution. Oftentimes it's compared to microevolution. So maybe just take a little bit of time and unpack what do you mean by macroevolution and how does it relate to microevolution? What do these terms mean?
Yeah, so in general, when I discuss this topic with many people, there is a huge controversy between micro and macroevolution. And lots of people do say, or evolutionists say that my macroevolution is microevolution plus time. And if you macroevolution is a major mechanism for evolution, and there's no, as far as we know, there's no observation of macroevolution. And we know that there are 8.7 million species on Earth, and in theory, at least, they should have evolved via macroevolution. Now, you are asking me for the definition of my macro evolution. But first of all, I will mention what is microevolution. Microevolution is small scale change in one system.
Yeah, and I think this is an important distinction because in my experience, almost everybody, regardless of your worldview, accepts microevolution, that the mechanisms of natural selection, sexual selection, genetic drift, even geographical or population isolation mechanisms can not only generate variation within a species, but can even transform one related species into, or one species into a closely related sister species. That idea isn't controversial. And so I think the larger point really is, does that mechanism really work to explain large scale changes that involve innovation, right? That's, am I understanding your perspective correctly?
Yes, actually, I'm going to challenge the uh, potential difficulties in macroevolution giving rise to new species. And it is important to look at uh, the Wikipedia definition. It says there's a decoupled view which says that there are separate macroevolutionary processes that cannot be sufficiently explained by microevolutionary process again. So it is important to recognize that this is one huge statement saying that microevolution and macroevolution are are two different processes. And Wikipedia seems to acknowledge this. And they are saying that there are separate processes in macroevolution, which is not there in microevolution. Microevolution is a drop of water. I would I would say macroevolution is an ocean. You can't practically make an ocean by collecting a drop of water at time at a time. So I feel that there's a huge difference between microevolution and macroevolution, which I'm going to dissect today.
Yeah, my experience is, at least among evolutionary biologists, is there are two schools of thought. One school of thought, which is, again, microevolution over vast periods of time can generate macroevolutionary changes. On the other hand, there are evolutionary biologists who would argue that the mechanisms of microevolution explain just that, microevolution and speciation, but they don't seem to be able to explain the generation of biological novelty, right? That there needs to be other processes that are evoked, but oftentimes there's not a very clear understanding as to what those additional processes might be. And so, there are, again, key transitions in life's history that really where life is going from one regime of complexity to another, or life is, there's an introduction of, again, biological novelty that, doesn't seem to be readily accounted for through the mechanisms of microevolution. Now, maybe before we get into the scientific challenges, I think the so what question is really very important. I mean, why should we even be concerned about this discussion, right? Why not just say, look, macroevolution is just a mystery at this point, a scientific mystery, and let's just move on from that. Let the experts work through that problem. So why, as a Christian, should we care about whether or not there are or not scientific challenges to macroevolution?
Well, we need to explain, we are challenging evolution's tree of life, and the evolutionists seem to explain it through two mechanisms, micro and macroevolution. So we need to challenge, or at least I'm challenging that macroevolution, which is a large scale, which is generally large scale changes, which is needed for tree of life, is not workable. We all know microevolution happens. It happens all the time. We can see, and but in general, when they describe microevolution, they describe one change at a time. Life is so complex. Life is not an add-on process. And when it comes to macroevolution, you need multiple systems involved in that process. So that's why the normal mechanisms of evolution, like random mutations, natural selection, drift, and those sort of processes cannot explain macroevolution.
Yeah. Okay. And to maybe belabor this point just a little bit more before we go into some specific concerns. Uh, you know, when I was an undergraduate student studying chemistry and biology, I was an agnostic, and I was told that evolution can explain everything in biology. And oftentimes I still hear, this was my mindset, and I still hear this mindset today, is that if evolution can explain everything, what role is there for a creator? A creator becomes superfluous. So this is, a significant concern, right? Because people are looking at macroevolution as really supplanting a creator, whereas microevolutionary mechanisms we could easily understand as part of God's providential care for humanity. Would you care to elaborate a little bit from your perspective?
Yeah, so as you say, microevolution can be seen. We know it happens. But when it comes to generally, when we discuss evolution, uh, they mention only anatomical structures which we could see. Maybe a beak, it could be a wing, or it could be a digit, it could be an arm. But life is so complex. There are many mechanisms which cannot be seen, right? Like biochemical processes, physiological processes, biomechanical, behavioral, and neural mechanisms. These cannot be seen. So, can we explain the totality of all life's processes through these mechanisms? In my opinion, we can't. And I'm going to describe why we can't explain it through macroevolution. And and also, many times when evolution is described mutation, they most of them think that a mutation will automatically bring a new feature. But we know the chances of positive mutation is so rare in bacterial study. The chances of positive mutation has been given as 1 in 10 million. So to have two positive mutations is one extremely rare. And for many changes, you need hundreds of mutations or maybe hundreds of genes. So it's mathematically impossible to make substantial changes through positive mutation because they are so rare. Um, so, macroevolution, as I said, they describe large scale change. Now, I want to ask you first, can you mention any uh, uh, function of ours, day-to-day function of ours, which is only limited to one system? I,
Yeah,
I, are you able to mention any?
no,
Because I can't.
yeah, your question is of very powerful rhetorical value, right? That yeah, biological systems are not in isolation. Even at a biochemical level, none of these systems are in isolation. They are heavily integrated with you know all the other molecular processes, and as you step up to more complex levels, at the cellular interactions or tissue interactions, the integration is even more complex.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I just take an example, we'll take speech, right? What are the systems needed for our speech? We need vocal cords. We need uh, intercostal muscles, diaphragm for airflow, right? We need pharynx. We need the tongue. We need the lips. We need the nasal airflow, and we need the saliva because if we have a dry mouth, it's difficult to speak. And on top of that, we also need the peripheral nerves like the vagus nerve, and most importantly, the brain, which controls vocal cords sometimes every second, even up to thousands of oscillations. So we need the whole package to create speech. So that's why when it comes to macroevolution, if you are describing a particular feature, always there will be multi-system input, and random mutations cannot produce multi-system input. And if I mention other things like you also mentioned biochemical reactions. Many biochemical reactions do have a cascading process, and they should appear sequentially at the appropriate time and in correct concentration. And if you take physiological reactions, again, multi-systems are involved. And so these are some of the multi-system changes which I'm saying a random process cannot uh, produce, because random mutation is random, cannot coordinate with other systems to develop these complex functions.
So maybe this is a good point to ask if you could give some examples that would maybe help the viewer and the listener appreciate more fully your point.
Okay, I want to first take a day-to-day example, right? We'll say you want to improve an existing car engine, right? And you can't improve the car engine just by adding parts. At some point, you need to change the housing, you need to change the pistons, you need to change the mechanics. So you need to make multiple changes at some point if you really want to improve the car engine. So similarly, in body systems, you need multi-system input, as I said. And one of the other things I want to challenge evolution is particularly with regards to a car engine. We say a car engine takes 50 steps, and the final product of the engine may be selectable. If it's good, it will be selectable. But how are the preceding 49 steps selected from the first nut and bolt, because they may not be of any value? So that's another challenge to the evolution is, yes, the final product may be selected. And this is quite relevant to many biochemical processes. So some processes do take 10, 20, 30 steps. Yes, the final product may be selectable, but which process selects the underlying the feeding mechanism? And it's a huge challenge. Many times, evolution says, oh, all those may have some function. We know it, they don't have function. You, as a biochemist, I'm sure, know that there are millions of biochemical mechanisms, and all the preceding steps do not have functions.
Yeah, well, with regard to your example of the car engine, it's not just simply, making changes to the car engine, or, doing it in a random manner, but you have to be rather deliberate in the changes that you're making. And those changes there has to be some foresight that you're making those changes with the idea that you're going to have to change other aspects of the car engine simultaneously, and in such a way that those changes are integrated and they are precise. So it's almost as if there has to be intelligent agency, some kind of foresight in order to make those changes if you are hoping that you're going to get improved performance. Now, if you don't care about improved performance, you can make those changes all you want, but you're not going to evolve things towards an improved version of the engine.
Yeah. So obviously, intelligence is needed. There's no doubt about it. But what I'm also saying that at some point or throughout the process, you need to make multiple other system changes for it to work. Life is much more complex than a car engine. I just want to say that uh, evolutionists will have to explain the tree of life through macroevolutionary process. So, what are the processes we need for, we'll say, species A to evolve to species B? Many times we are shown one or two intermediate fossils, but is that adequate to show that one species have evolved to another? Because if we look at two species uh, in a tree of life, and if you compare, there will be changes in their anatomy, in their biochemistry, physiology, biomechanics, respiratory system, cardiovascular system, gastrointestinal system, genitourinary system, reproductive system, muscular systems, brain and nerve system, vision, hearing, vestibular system. So if you so these are the changes macroevolution has to achieve if one species has to evolve to another species. Like, for example, Australopithecus or common ancestor has to evolve to a human. There has to be changes in all these systems, but many times we are shown only few fossils which are simply not adequate. Uh, Coming on to biochemical process, if you take um, cholesterol uh, synthesis from acetyl CoA, that has got about 30 steps. And if the final product is not synthesized, because it's an essential component, the the, uh, the animal will die. So that whole process has to come one after the other in a sequential manner, and uh, which means that it cannot come via a random via a microevolutionary random process. It has to come sequentially and proper concentration. And we know that there are many metabolic diseases. Why do we have metabolic diseases? Because that process is interrupted at certain points. Then you get toxic materials accumulating. We'll say if a process has got 10 steps, and if it stuck uh, in stage 5, that product will accumulate, causing toxicity, and which is detrimental to the animal or the person. So this is why um, uh, you have many metabolic diseases. So when it comes to an essential uh, product or biochemical product, the whole process has to work sequentially. And I think uh, microevolutionary or random mutational process cannot produce this sequential process. And there are, when we talk about biochemical processes, as you know, there are tens of thousands or millions of biochemical processes which happens in a system. To name some of the other things, citrulline, cortisol, and thyroxine. And I want to move on to fossil evidence. If you look at the next slide, uh, I have shown the fossil evidence of progression of uh, horses, and in that there are four stages, and this is what we are shown generally in in evolution descriptions. So, uh, and they show that these intermediate forms are based on the skull changes as well as changes in the limbs. Now, previously I did mention that we need to show changes in all body systems. Now, in the opposite picture, I have shown uh, uh, progression of cars from an old car to new, and there are about 50 stages there, as you see. And intelligence need so many stages to improve one product to another product. And between each of them, each of the stages, you will see new mechanics, new tires, new suspensions, a new interior, new electrical system. This is if intelligence need so many intermediate stages to develop an old car to a new car version, we are shown only one or two stages, intermediate stages, when they say one species evolved to another species. I think this is grossly inadequate. And macroevolutionary macroevolution processes should show how each of the body systems have changed, not only the bone structure. Uh, I want to um, take on bipedal mobility. Now, this is a large scale change which is described in human evolutionary process, and many times in evolution textbooks, what they say is they regain bipedal mobility. That's all they say. But if you look at what are the underlying processes which we need to have bipedal mobility, I will list some of them. We need S-shaped spine. We have got about 600 muscles, and uh, apes who are quadrupeds, their muscles have to change to support bipedal movement, which means hundreds of muscles have to change at the same time, because you can't have upright posture with quadruped muscle function, right? So hundreds of muscles have to change simultaneously, and the lumbar bones have to be strong, they have to be thicker, foramen magnum has to change, the pelvis has to become shorter and wider, and this makes a huge change to human lifestyle, because it uh, the pelvic changes means humans have shorter gestational period, which means our babies are not developed as many animals. So it has got a huge impact on all of life cycle of humans. Upright posture means pelvic changes, shorter gestational time, and um, babies are not as developed as many animals. Then we need arched feet. We need shorter. We have shorter arms because apes are quadrupeds. They have got long arms, and short arms means we have got dexterity. So what I'm trying to say is the upright posture means automatically there's a ripple effect on many systems, and without these changes, most are have to be simultaneous changes, like the muscle changes. Uh, Upright posture will not work. So this is why macroevolution is multi-systemic, and most of the time, many systems have to arise at the same time to support that function, and these cannot be explained via evolution. I want to take other example. Our hands. Many times, evolutionary descriptions show our hands to ape hand and say that look, the bone structure is the same, and therefore our hands have evolved from apes. But in any of these descriptions, we need to look at the totality of the changes. Most of the time, they look at the bone structure and say that the bone structure is similar, but and therefore we have evolved. But if you look at the totality of human hand function and the ape hand function, ape are knuckle walkers, whereas with our hands we use it for writing, eating, washing, dressing, toileting, carrying things, making things, greet people. We use our hands for sports, art, expressing sympathy and empathy. I'm using my hands to talk, social communications, clapping, throwing things accurately. We are the only species who can throw things accurately. We are the only species who can thread a needle, uh, 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 a string through a needle. Then our hands have got enormous sensations. Even if we are blindfolded, we can touch things and guess what we are touching. And for sensations alone, there are 14 different nerve fibers needed for hand sensations. Now, from where do all these functions come from? All these functions come through our brain connection. So it is no, there's no uh, the peripheral changes without the simultaneous brain changes will not work, and they cannot come after thousands or millions of years. They have to come simultaneously through brain networks, and this is one of the other things macroevolution cannot do, or through microevolutionary process, because they say things happen one at a time. No, these have to happen simultaneously. The peripheral changes and the complex brain changes in the frontal cortex, sensory cortex, thalamus, cerebellum, all have to arise at the same time. Otherwise, uh, it won't work. Our hand function is totally different to the hand function of uh, apes.
Yeah. So, yeah, I could listen to you describe countless examples here of these highly integrated systems that require simultaneous changes. Just for the sake of time, let's move on to the the response to your challenge that evolutionary biologists would often level, which is, well, we've got millions of years. So you're correct in that there are these changes that need to take place, but we've got vast periods of time available to us to go from some ape-like creature to modern humans. Maybe there's 6 to 7 million years. Surely that's enough time.
Well, that is the escape clause for many evolutionists. And I must say it doesn't work. For many systems, time is against evolution. If I just take a day to day example first, if you want to have a fruit salad, you may need five fruits, isn't it? If you have one fruit and if you have to wait for another 10 years for the second fruit to come, you will never have a fruit salad, isn't it? So, for many complex systems, the whole package should arise within a short time, sometimes simultaneously. I'm going to describe a few examples. Male pregnancy of seahorse. This is a unique development. So it is not seen in any other species. So what does the male seahorse have to have? They need to have an elongated body. They need to have new muscle. They need to have a new chamber. They need to have new hormones. They need to have new chemicals. They need to have new behavior. Now, even if they want to produce one generation, the whole package has to be there. They cannot come over thousands of years because for reproduction, the whole package needs to be there because it is so finely tuned. So, therefore, in this situation, you time is against, or the whole system should arise at the same time. I will take another example. Alaskan wood frog, it freezes during winter, right? It becomes like a rock. 70 to 80% of the water is drawn out of cells, right? They produce large amount of glucose and urea through metabolic process, through their liver for that process. And with a drop in temperature, the heart stops, the respiratory stops, brain activity stops. And you must remember, the bone cells, you can say that could survive, but some cells, like the corneal cells, they're so vulnerable, right? And in this process, the whole package has to come simultaneously. Otherwise, they will not be able to survive even one winter. So they cannot come one at a time, as evolutionists generally tend to say. So time is against evolution in that example. And similarly, if you look at uh, from a zygote stage to new life. So zygote is the first cell of all life, and through the pregnancy period, at the end of it, you get a new baby. And just imagine the number of processes you get, millions and millions of processes which even we don't know. It needs to develop all body systems, the heart, the lung, the spleen, the kidneys, blood, the brain, and immunological system. It cannot be haphazard. I just want to show in the next slide about some brain pathways. It is in the thalamus. Thalamus is a small area of the brain on either side of the thumb-sized area. It has got 60 nuclei, and this gives the pathways of four of those nuclei, right? And all those pathways have to be exact, right? So it is the amount of information in zygote is enormous, and all those systems, all those processes have to come simultaneously. They cannot come one at a time. Recently, I saw the National Institute of Health. They have given a merit award grant to look into uh, the gestational development, and in that they say the biochemical reactions that generate organs are magical. So we as humans still don't know the processes. And all these processes have to come simultaneously, uh, not one at a time as evolution or through evolution dictates. Same with metamorphosis from caterpillar stage. It disintegrates into one or two cells, and those cells develop a butterfly. And that whole process needs to be present at the same time. They cannot over millions of years.
The point you're making here is really profound because one of the key transitions in life's history is the transition from single-celled organisms to complex multicellular organisms. And it's one thing to have colonial aggregates of cells, right? But you're talking about a transition from colonial aggregates to organisms that have these complex organ systems that are heavily integrated, and they have to be produced from a single cell stage through this very elaborate process of development. And in some respects, metamorphosis is a twist on development, if you will, where you have a contravening larval stage. That to me is a multi-systems example squared or to the highest order. It's so when you talk about what is needed to make that critical transition in life's history, it is just to me mind-boggling to think that this is something that could happen any other way than occurring simultaneously, and there's just not mechanisms that produce that type of simultaneity.
Yeah, so that blueprint has to be there. It cannot come one at a time, as evolutionists say that through random mutation, the whole blueprint uh, from zygote to new birth or metamorphosis has to be present instantly.
We're beginning to run short on time. We're going to have you back, I think, to elaborate on this whole challenge that you're raising to, I think, a much greater degree. But when we look at the evolutionary tree of life, right, which is really the point that you're raising, is that macroevolution is, in a sense, intertwined inextricably from this evolutionary tree of life. You expect progressive improvements as you go up the tree, but are there deviations from that?
Yeah, I, I want to mention a very significant deviation, which probably has not been mentioned in any of the discussions or books. Uh, so, if you take humans, I consider humans as one of the weakest species on Earth physically, right? So, if you look at physicality, uh, if we are exposed to cold, for example, cold environment, we can't survive, isn't it? Whereas all the animals will survive whatever the environment throws at them, right? Whereas we need hygienic food, clothing, shelter, heating, shoes, whereas animals will survive whether it's cold, rain, snow, hot weather, or wind, whatever the environment throws at them. And if you look at uh, physical function, our muscle power is much less than chimps. Many animals can run faster, uh, jump and climb trees much better. So physically, whereas evolution says that when we go up the tree, things do improve so that the the species up on the tree are more geared to surviving the environment. Humans have gone back physically, but we have got the massive brain power to compensate, though we have gone back on physical measures. So I don't think evolutionary mechanisms can explain that that change we see in humans. We have on physical characteristics, we are much weaker than apes or common ancestor, or because they survive in the normal environment.
Yeah, and maybe there's another example that you could give us about challenges to evolution. That, for example, you mentioned the evolution of sexes. The idea of sexual reproduction is admittedly by evolutionary biologists an enigma. Maybe unpack a little bit of that as we kind of bring this episode to a close.
So it is important to uh, recognize at every stage of evolution, there has to be parallel male and females. So if you say that evolution is through random mutation, we'll say in a male, it cannot make uh, corresponding changes to a female. So for reproduction, it has to tally exactly not only the uh, sexual act, but also the hormones, the behavior, and even the proteins which attract the sperm to to the ovum. They are very specific. So at each stage, there has to be parallel male and female females if reproduction needs to happen. So how can, when you say a mutational process in one side of that, uh, uh, coordinate simultaneous changes in the other sex to give reproduction? And again, this is not something which has been discussed openly, and I think it's a very significant challenge to evolution to explain how these parallel changes could occur via random mutations, because there are changes in males and females.
Yeah, so I mean, what you're talking about there is, not only in if you're changing the reproductive system in a male that's evolving into a new species, there you're looking at this complex system set of changes that are taking place that have to function well, but then you have to have companion changes that are taking place in female individuals that again are multi-system, that where those systems have to be integrated with a high degree of precision. So this is really compounding the problem and in a rather, startling way, I guess.
Yeah, it is sometimes males and females can look quite different, and there's a lot of dysmorphic changes. But from a reproductive point of view, all the systems have to work perfectly, and that coordination you cannot explain through a random mutational process. And even if you get a new change in males, they cannot coordinate changes in the females to have that reproduction pathway perfect.
Yeah. So, you know, the bottom line here is that there's, you know, you've identified, I think, a highly significant scientific challenge to this idea of macroevolution. And, at the same time, when you think about these highly integrated multi systems that are working together to achieve a particular biological function, all of our experience with those kind of systems is suggests that they have to be produced by a mind that has a comprehensive understanding of how these systems are working, how they have to be integrated, and it requires remarkable level of foresight and ingenuity. So this scientific challenge, I think, dovetails beautifully with, corresponding a corresponding case for the necessity of a creator.
Yes. So one of the main messages I want to give is that when it comes to macroevolution, it is multi-systemic, and many times the whole system has to arise at the same time. Just like I said in bipedal walking. So the whole system has to, it cannot come over thousands or millions of years, because unless you have the whole system, it will not work. It will be worse than what it was present before. So if you take the ape quadruped walking, uh, and if you have the bipedal walking without the muscle changes, ape quadruped walking will be better, because you need to have the new muscle structure to support bipedal walking. So therefore, it has to come at the same time, and that is beyond evolutionary mechanics.
Yeah. Yeah. So the mechanisms of evolution just simply aren't there to sustain, that type of a rather significant transformation. Yeah, this has been really a very enjoyable conversation. You've brought some incredible insight to us, Uditha. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. And we definitely need to have you back on the show. You've got remarkable insight, and I appreciate that very much. By the way, you've written a book that we should make sure our viewers are aware of. Could you tell us a little bit about the book that you've written and how people could get access to your work?
Yeah, so it is called Intelligent Design as Proof of Creation, and it is available via Amazon. And some of the things I described today are in the book. And in my book, which is a very simple book, but I cut across the the case for intelligent design from universe down to cells. So universe, solar system, life on Earth, humans, animals, various systems, cells, going down to DNA. So it cuts across many levels to give scientific analysis supporting intelligent design.
Good, good. Well,
And it is available through Amazon.
Okay, great. Well, I hope our viewers and our listeners purchase copies. Thank you so much again for taking the time to be with us. You're joining us from the United Kingdom, so the time difference is significant. And so you're probably up very late. So thank you so much for making that effort to be with us.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity once again.
Yeah, and thank you too for watching this episode of Star Cells and God. We would love for you to join the discussion by leaving your comments in the comments section. And make sure that you like this video, that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you use the notification button to be alerted when the next episode of Star Cells and God drops, which is every Wednesday. And not only can you get the episode through YouTube, but also through your favorite podcasting apps. Make sure you share this video with a friend. And remember, the more that we know about science, the more that we have reasons to believe in the triune God of the Bible.